I want to welcome you to the Engineer Your Success podcast. I'm your host, Dr. James Bryant, and it is my pleasure to have a very special guest for today's show. We have Mr. Chaz Weaver. Chaz, how are you doing today?
Great, James. Thanks for having me.
No, that's great, Chaz. Can you tell our audience a little bit about yourself? We're going to include a link to your LinkedIn profile or wherever you want people to go to find out more about you. But just briefly, just tell the people a little bit about yourself.
I'm the district materials engineer for VDOT in the Stanton district, the western section of the district, if you're familiar with it, with 81 going right smack dab in the middle of it.
Yeah.
I've been with VDOT for, looked it up the other day, 20 couple years.
Oh, wow.
Let's say I'm a lifer.
So for those of you that are not familiar with that, VDOT is the Virginia Department of Transportation. And he's talking about a different part of the state where I-81 is, where there's a whole bunch of truck traffic that goes through there.
Wow.
That is the area that he works. So Chaz, again, you say you've been with VDOT for about 20 plus years. You're a lifer. Can you tell the audience a little bit about your journey in becoming an engineer? What got you interested in engineering in the first place?
I think really, it's kind of a boring story, but it's good at math. Of course, that's kind of how every engineer story starts. And your guidance counselor said, "Well, what about engineering?" Looked into it, and I really wanted to work on big projects, large, heavy civil projects. So that's when I decided, to look into civil engineering. Went to Virginia Tech, got my BS in civil engineering, and then when I started looking for jobs, VDOT was one of the higher on the list because of their range in Virginia. If you work at VDOT, you can work anywhere in Virginia. Mm-hmm. And other DOTs not that different, but I'm from Virginia, and larger projects like you said, 81, things like that.
What made you focus in on materials?
That was the position that was open. Like I said, it was a pretty boring story, but I went into what we call the engineer trainee program at the time. Now it's the EDGE program. We have better words like associate than trainee now. I started in Northern Virginia district, but what really, I guess, made me like materials was the inclusion in everything. You're in what we call preliminary engineering. So when you're scoping the project, when you're developing plans, specifications, the geotechnical design, pavement design, all that early stuff, but you're also involved in the materials that go into the work. So you're involved in construction on the back end. So, and then even in maintenance. So there's not really anything, if you do something in VDOT, you're using materials. So we're involved in a lot of different things, work with a lot of different people.
So Chaz, what are some of the more interesting stories that you may have early on in your career? So, okay, you're finishing up, you graduate, you join VDOT, you're in the trainee program, you're going across the state doing different things. Give our audience an interesting story from that time period.
Oh boy, interesting engineering stories. I'm kind of used to putting people to sleep. Early on, I'm trying to think. When you're a trainee, you do a lot of. They shift you around to different sections, doing a lot of different things. I don't know. I don't know that it's that funny. I was working on a project out at West Point. It's where the Mattaponi and Pamunkey rivers come together. It's out east of Richmond. And, I'm kind of like the new guy, doesn't know anything. They just put you on there to oversee or at least observe the guys putting in geotechnical instrumentation. So those guys have been working in the field. They know what they're doing. They're just out there doing the job. And I remember, I think it was a piezometer installation or something. And, it's hot, it's muggy. Like I said, you're down there, in a swamp next to a river, and the guy's got to get up on a ladder to do to put the piezometer in the pipe and everything. So he's got a ladder, and he's just complaining about having to wear his hard hat and whatever. And it's like, you're the new guy. You're like, hey, rules are rules. If somebody drives by, whatever. And about 10 minutes later, he forgot his hammer, on top of the ladder. He moves the ladder to go to the next place. He comes down, hits him on his helmet. It's like, yeah,
Rules are there for a reason, right?
Yeah, I'm looking out for you, aren't I?
Yeah, but that's an interesting kind of story, because there sometimes when there's certain precautions that we may be advised to take, we don't want to take them. We're like, I don't need this. This is cumbersome. But those things can be the very thing that help you survive that actual experience. Because had he not had his helmet on, that would have been a very interesting day for you as the trainee being there, seeing, what the outcome of that would have been.
Yeah, I mean, it would have hurt, no doubt. And like I said, with the term trainee, you get a lot of that feedback, like, oh, you're just a trainee. Why don't you give it a couple years before you know something? But, we try and get as many associates, engineering interns, engineering scholars that we can during the summers. And, especially I think since I've gotten older, really appreciate that they bring something different to the table. They know stuff that you don't know.
Mm-hmm.
Not to date myself too much, but databases, GIS, a lot of this, the newer big data stuff. It's like, oh, you know how to do well. I have a job for you. Yeah, that's cool.
Yeah. So it's being able to leverage what the younger generation, what they're good at, what they know, and being open and curious in learning from that experience and inviting them in to make a contribution, not just be told something.
Yeah. I think my experience and a lot of others back then was if the manager or whatever section you're with is too big, we're always busy. Mm-hmm. But they'll get the summons. Hey, you're going to train this guy for the next month. Some people will literally give you the spec book, sit you in a corner and say, read it. I don't have time to do this right now, but here, read this manual. And, on one hand, you've got to have your own motivation. You got to take your own initiative to learn what you need to learn and get out of it what you can. But it's also a lost opportunity for that manager. We've put people on some pretty, I think, exciting projects, many projects that we don't have time to do ourselves, but hey, with your skills and abilities, I think you can do this. And, they do that for the whole summer, as opposed to the other trainees, measuring curb and gutter and things like that. Yeah. They get to do a real hands-on project that they can put on their resume or use for a class later or whatever.
So I think that that's key in terms of looking at the evolution of the program and how different people approach that program. You have the trainee who does have apps or I forget what do you call them, associate. That
I think they're engineer associates now. Yeah,
the engineering associates that have the responsibility of their own career, right? They have to have some get up and go to come and learn and to move things forward. But there's also a responsibility that those managers actually have. And it's kind of as you're moving from an individual contributor into a leader or management position, and you're responsible for cultivating the development of people that are around you, and that are working for you. That's a huge responsibility. And not all managers are prepared to actually do that. What typically happens is that you're good at a technical area, you're a good engineer. The next rung in terms of the promotion is for you to become a manager. You become a manager, you may do some management training. They tell you all of the administrative things that you need to, work through. But then there's also this other piece where you have to coach and manage and lead people.
Yeah, and I think that's an important part, not just the management with budgets, performance evaluation, all that stuff, but just communicate. Yep. You've got all sorts of different clients, whether it's like I said, construction, preliminary engineering, the contractor, the industry, consultants. You need to be able. Yeah, that's great that you're a technical expert, but not everybody speaks that language.
Yeah.
So it's good practice, and it's good training for the manager too, to be able to explain it. If you don't really grasp that concept if you can't explain it to somebody.
Yeah. And what I say is that there's the engineers, we get kind of a bad rap people say that engineers can't communicate. And I always come back and say, that's not true. Engineers are great communicators to other engineers that are in their specialty area. It's when you have to communicate some of those complex concepts, that you understand as a course of doing business every day, to somebody that's not doing it every day, becomes kind of the roadblock or the challenge.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, having, I guess, empathy, and understanding of the other person's position. In this case, a trainee or associate engineer.
Mm-hmm.
Again, it could be a contract, it could be, networking, getting to know those people, what they're not just knowledgeable of, but what are their motivations. I
Yeah.
can talk to you about the settlement of an embankment, but if you're a contractor, he's just worried about schedule. How long is this going to take? What can I do to speed this up? So
No, I think that's great. Being able to show empathy, being able to connect with people where they are. And what I'm understanding from what you're saying is part of that is understanding what's in it for them. Like you're saying, if you're talking to the contractor, you can talk through the technical stuff, but he's thinking about schedule. He's thinking about, cost. And I have to be able to do this. How can I speed this up? And I think it is wise to be able to have that perspective, or at least have that in mind when you're communicating with that individual, because you understand kind of what's motivating them and what in the context of the conversation that they're having.
Yeah, and for me, knowing a little bit what the motivations are for the different sections, there's no sense in me doing a geotechnical design or something this way if I know environmental is not going to like that. Having at least a rudimentary understanding what they're after helps me kind of fine tune, optimize my designs too.
And see, to me, Chaz, this is one of the reasons why I talk about the concepts that we approach on the Engineer Your Success podcast, is to help you achieve success both in business and in life, because the same concept of communication that you're taking through when you're saying the different sections, the different pieces that are within VDOT that you're working with, is the same care and the same approach that we would take for different people that we interact with on a day-to-day basis in terms of how we actually communicate with them. One of the things that I always like to joke about is that everything I needed to learn about communication in business and in life, I learned in the first 3 years of marriage, because my lovely wife and I communicate totally differently. And it took some time for me to be able to adapt and understand how to best communicate to her. And it took her time how to best communicate with me. And kind of the way that I say that is that I had to learn how to package what it was I was saying in a way that she could receive it and figure out, like what to do with it. Whereas before I would communicate with a way that was comfortable for me. Very similar. You could communicate a design that's comfortable for you. This is how we do it. But if it's not packaged in a way that it is going to show empathy, it's going to show that you understand what that other person may be considering or going through, it may not be well received.
Right. And you probably had the same conversation. It takes a little while to figure out how to communicate perfectly. And when the light bulb comes off, you're like, oh, this is what I'm doing wrong. It was me. And she's like, yes,
yep,
that's what I've been saying.
but part of it, it's understanding people and where they are and being curious, right? When you are able to approach these conversations from a position of curiosity, I don't have to be right, but I have to understand. Seek to understand before you're trying to be understood. And when you do that, it helps to guide the conversation in a so much more productive way than we're having this conversation. I have my point. I need to make my point. I need to be right. So I'm not listening to what you're saying because I need to be right.
Yeah. I mean, we've, in this industry, and I'm sure in others as well, you find yourself in meetings. There are a couple individuals that have to be the smartest person in the room.
Mm-hmm.
But if you come into the situation, like say with environmental, and say, why can't I do this? That's probably not going to get you too far. If you come into the situation, like you say, what are your motivations? What's wrong with this from your perspective? What can we do to make this work? That goes a long way.
Yeah. It's like you're essentially coming into that conversation with, I want to understand your concerns so that we can figure out a way that those concerns can be addressed.
Right. And it helps you, like I said, not just assume for yourself, oh, environmental doesn't like this, and do that the rest of your 20-year career, but at least know who to call when you have a question about these things.
Yeah, yeah.
I remember specifically this issue. I better call Darren and
Yeah.
work this out.
I think that is key. So, obviously you've had this successful career at VDOT. Um, what are some general success principles that you would like to cover, or you think that would be great for our audience to be able to take home from this interview?
We were talking about the initiative that you have to take as an engineer associate to get the most out of the program. But, whether you're in a program or not, I hate to tell you, your parents are right. There's really no substitute for hard work. If you're, just going into a situation, assuming people are going to do things for you, yeah, you're there to be trained. But again, if you take your own initiative to get the most that you can out of it, sometimes we are busy. We have other things to do. We're trying to include you in that, but getting that on time feedback, asking good questions. Well, okay, you said settlement. What does that mean? Whatever the case may be, you're the biggest part of that. You can suck as much knowledge as you can out of these people and learn who you want to work with and who you don't. I think that's also a big issue. You want to find maybe not a mentor, but at least someone that you can bounce ideas off of. That's a little more open to share their knowledge. Sometimes managers, like you said, they move up from engineer, and then they're working with people that they're concerned for their job, and they're a little tighter with information, things like that. I try not to be that way.
Yeah.
Use your good managers want to use as much of your talent as possible without overloading you. I probably go in the other direction. I probably expect a lot out of people until they prove me wrong. So yeah,
No, I think people often live up to the expectations that we place on them. If we have low expectations, then they're not, they're going to meet the expectation that we put on them in that sense.
Right. That's why I like to err on the side of too high rather than low. But then, you do need that feedback. Hey, boss, this is not my gig. Well, I'm good at this other thing.
Yeah. But part of it is this open and honest discussion that you're able to have. And so if I were to recap that, for young engineers that are coming through, do not be afraid to ask questions. Just as we are talking about, the managers have to be empathetic and understanding the situation that the associate or the young engineer is in. It's also important for that young engineer to have some concept of what that manager may be going through and what they're doing. Because having that may help you better engage as you develop in your career. So it's just not from the top down that have to have that understanding, but also when you're coming up, you have to have the understanding of what's going on above you.
Right. I don't really think there's anything off limits in a program like that, or any new engineer, in a new position. You're in a new position. I mean, it's understood. You're here to be trained.
Mm-hmm.
And I've been here 20 years, but that's not to say that I know everything. That things change in a large organization. Policies change, even design methods. That you probably had in school. We didn't have MEPDG, mechanistic empirical pavement design. When I was in school, we didn't have LRFD. It's not just assume, oh, this kid should know everything coming out of school. We all went to different schools. We had different classes, different professors, and things are done differently in each organization. So it's understood. Don't have any anxiety about asking questions.
Yeah. So be prepared and be okay with asking those questions. A couple of things I wanted to kind of get into next is that I understand that you are actually a published author. Can you tell the audience a little bit about that?
Yeah, I wrote a book about a baseball league that we have here in the Shenandoah Valley. It's called the Valley Baseball League. It's a summer league for college players. So when they're off of school, the ones who aren't drafted, they're, again, taking their own initiative. They're getting on these summer baseball teams so the recruits can see them. They can get used to wooden bats like they'll have in the minors and the majors. And it's very short, just a few months in the summer, but it's been going on we've had over 100 seasons.
Oh, wow.
So it's a pretty historic, endeavor. It's totally volunteer. All the teams now are 501c. They're nonprofit, and it's it's a really great thing to have around here.
So what piqued your interest in actually going to do the research? And because I imagine it took some time to get the research together and looking at old articles and other things of piecing things together.
It's a work in progress too, but I'd gone to VBL games with my friends, from growing up here. And in about 2013, 14, I actually got divorced. I had a little more time on my hands, and it felt like I needed some, a hobby. And my daughter was interested, and I was trying to, kind of give her some, homeschooling. This is how, we used to put newspapers on microfiche. This is how you find things in a library. She was 8 at the time. So just really start with that. And I had my own interests, like, I know from the 80s, and that's it. I don't know how anything started or when this stadium was built or any of that. So we started looking some things up, and it just became, because I'm an engineer, I started taking notes. I may have developed a spreadsheet or two. And it just kind of snowballed, it got more and more interesting. It's like, wow, that's actually cool. There's way more information that we gathered in the first week that's on their website.
Oh, wow.
And it was like, wow, and originally it was, I'm sure someone's wrote a book about this. Let's go look it up. And then there weren't any. So we kind of did our own research, and I don't think she found it as interesting as Daddy did, but I kind of just ran with it.
Oh, that is cool, man. I imagine that was a really good bonding experience for you and your daughter, kind of going through that. Even if you got more out of the book and the research than she did, I imagine that was just good present time, just building your relationship.
Oh yeah. Yeah. And we went to the All-Star game, not the All-Star, we went to the playoffs a couple of weeks ago.
Oh, cool.
So we still go to games together and, all that. So it's been pretty good. She got her picture in the book. When she was 8, she just liked to chase home run and foul balls. That's what it was about. And it's progressed from there.
No, that is good, man. What were some interesting stories that you came across in the book in doing your research?
Some things that it's weird. I've grown up in Harrisonburg my whole life, and things that, like I say, happen, 1 or 2 days in the summer. And I guess people remember them for a while, and they become kind of a legend. And then, the next generation's never heard about it. But Hack Wilson, if you know who that is, he had 190 RBIs for the Chicago Cubs in 1934. I mean, everybody, if you're a baseball fan, you know who that is, because that's the record. It's probably never going to be broken. He actually played for an all-star team that traveled and went to that played in Harrisonburg.
Oh, wow.
At the Harrisonburg High School field. So it was like, wow, that's cool. Just finding out there were perfect games thrown. Some of these really exciting games that happened. There was a guy that hit 5 home runs in one game. It's kind of a funny story. He hit, I think, the first 3, and the pitcher was a little bit of a card. So he picked up the rosin bag and threw that as a pitch. And then, and he went on to hit 2 more. And it's like, it's the major league record's 4. It's like 5. That's ridiculous.
Oh,
just
that's
weird
cool.
Things like that.
No, that is pretty cool. I'm glad that you found an outlet for just gathering that information and spending time with your daughter, and providing, I guess, additional information to the community at large, because I'm quite sure that as the baseball league and the people that were around started looking at what you were gathering in your book, that they were happy too, to kind of get the word out and to get more exposure.
Yeah, I think the league was really happy to have someone put that that kind of thing together, have that interest, and provide a reference, for their history, basically.
Mhm. Well, Chaz, I want to thank you for taking the time out of your schedule for this interview. Do you have any parting words for the podcast listeners?
Not really. I think it's a really cool. Yeah, I don't do a whole lot of podcasts, but since you and I started talking, I started watching a few of yours, and it's really, really cool. I like it.
All right, Chaz, I want to
Checking out
thank you
the rest of
again.
them.
I'm going to end this podcast episode like I end every episode. Many people know what to do. Fewer people know how to do it. And there's a select group of people that actually follow through, do it, and are living the life of their dreams. Chaz, I want to thank you for being part of that select few. And just thank you so much for your time on the podcast.
No problem. Anytime.